Okay, let's just dive right in. The story we're unpacking today it's one of those that is just profoundly disturbing. It really pushes the absolute limit of what you can imagine in terms of cruelty.
Hmm.
We're going to Indonesian Borneo, specifically to the jungles of central Kalimantan, and we're focusing on this really dark story that started around 1996, and it all came to a head in 2003.
Yeah, and this is a really challenging one to get through, but I think it's a necessary deep dive. Our sources, they lay out this just sustained systemic abuse of a single orangutan. Her name was Pony.
Over 6 years.
6 agonizing years. And our mission here isn't just to, list the facts of her capture and rescue. It's to really structure the story so you can see the profound impact of that abuse and the surprising number of people involved.
It wasn't just one person.
No, not at all. It was an individual and then an entire community. And we have to talk about the long-term, the irreversible consequences of this specific kind of crime.
And the reason this case is so well known, the reason it became international news, is the nature of the crime itself.
Right.
The sources confirm Pony was held captive as a forced sex slave in a village brothel. And the motive was just so raw and depraved. The price was staggeringly low, about £2
Or $3. It's just,
Yeah.
It's the total commodification of an endangered sentient being for pocket change.
And when the rescue teams, the folks from the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, or BOSF, when they finally got there and confirmed the rumors, their reaction was just one of complete moral collapse.
Yeah.
I mean, these are people who've seen terrible things. Orangutans shot, abused, kept as pets.
But this was different. This was organized. It was torture as a business model. There's one comment from a rescuer that it sticks with you. He said, "I never thought humans would do something like this to an animal."
Wow.
Then that just confirms it. This wasn't some random act. It was a functioning business that relied on a total, absolute lack of empathy.
So to really understand the depth of this tragedy, I think we have to start with the victim herself.
Yeah.
We need to appreciate who Pony is. She's an orangutan.
Orangutan.
Right.
Which means
Person of the forest in Malay and Indonesian. And, the name is just so fitting.
In what way?
Well, they're strikingly similar to us. Biologically, they share 96.4% of their genetic makeup with humans. It's staggering.
That is incredibly close.
But it goes deeper than DNA. Their intelligence, their capacity for learning and problem solving, their emotional complexity, it's often compared to that of a human child. They're gentle, they're social, they're incredibly smart.
And it's those very things, that gentleness, that intelligence, that makes them such a target for the illegal pet trade.
That's the core of the problem. It leads directly to what happened to Pony. See, orangutans, they have the longest childhood of any non-human primate.
Longer than chimps.
Much longer.
Yeah.
A young orangutan, like Pony would have been, stays with its mother for up to 8 years.
8 years. Yeah, learning every single thing they need to survive. What to eat, how to build a safe nest way up in the trees, how to avoid predators, everything.
So if a poacher wants an infant, they can't just, lure it away? The mother is always there.
The mother is always there, and she will fight to the death to protect her child.
So
yeah, the grim reality, and the sources are very clear on this, is that to get an infant orangutan, you almost always have to kill the mother first. You shoot her out of the tree.
it's a double tragedy then. You lose a breeding female from an already fragile population, and you inflict this immense trauma on the infant who's just watched its mother die.
Precisely, and that's exactly what happened to Pony around 1996. She was just a baby, probably, when her mother was killed. She was taken, terrified and alone, and then sold on the black market.
But her story takes this uniquely horrific turn right at this point.
It really does. She wasn't sold to a rich person for a private zoo or even as a pet, which, would have been terrible in its own right. She was purchased by a local Indonesian woman in this village, Karangpangi.
And our sources describe this woman as having an evil plan. I mean, those are strong words.
They are, but it was a calculated scheme. She wasn't looking for a pet. She was looking for a commodity.
Something to generate revenue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The first thing she did was put Pony in a dark, confined room. And the goal was, it was rapid, systematic dehumanization. She was going to take this intelligent, sensitive creature and turn her into a disposable tool for sex work.
This wasn't abuse that happened by accident. It was a business plan.
It was a business plan from day one.
6 years. We have to keep coming back to that number. For 6 years, Pony was trapped in this system of degradation. It was a deliberate assault, wasn't it? Both physical and psychological.
Completely deliberate, designed to just erase her identity as an orangutan. And the physical abuse was phase 1. It was about breaking her.
So orangutans have that distinctive, long red hair.
Right, which is thick and protective. The woman took scissors, clippers, and shaved Pony's entire body.
That might sound like a small thing to some people, but in a tropical jungle environment, losing your natural coat, I mean, that's devastating.
It's constant physical suffering. You strip away their only defense against the sun, the rain, the insects. Pony immediately developed these severe chronic skin inflammations.
Oh, wow.
And painful abscesses all over her body. She was constantly being bitten by mosquitoes and other insects, which led to nonstop itching, scratching, which of course just made the open wounds worse.
So she was living in this state of perpetual irritation and pain.
Just from being shaved.
Yeah.
And then came the grotesque attempt to make her look, I guess, human for the clients.
This is the part that's just so hard to get your head around.
To complete this bizarre transformation, she forced Pony to wear cheap jewelry, little skirts, black stockings, and she would routinely apply what the reports call exaggerated makeup.
What does that even mean?
Think, harsh eyeshadow, bright red lipstick, heavy blush, and she'd drench her in perfume. The goal was to groom her into this mockery of a pretty girl, blurring the line just enough for the clients.
But she needed more than a dressed-up animal. She needed a compliant one. And that's where the psychological battle comes in.
And that was arguably the most damaging part. It was a brutal form of conditioning based on pain and starvation.
So when Pony fought back, which she must have done initially.
Of course she did. She's a wild animal. She would bite or scratch her captor, and the woman's response was extreme violence, severe beatings.
And the key tool to break her resistance.
Food, or the lack of it. That was the cruel key. If Pony refused to comply or resisted a client, the woman would deny her food, sometimes for days on end.
When Pony was chained up, she couldn't escape.
Often chained to a wall or a sofa, so she was trapped in this relentless cycle. Resist, get beaten, starve, comply, get a scrap of food.
The psychological impact of that for an intelligent primate is just. It's almost impossible to imagine. It's forcing a complete recalibration of your survival instincts.
It's called learned helplessness. Pony learned very quickly that fighting back just meant more pain and hunger. Compliance, however, might earn her a meager reward. The sources say she became thoroughly subdued.
Her wild self was just overwritten.
Overwritten by the primal need to just survive the next hour.
And this brings us to what is maybe the most heartbreaking detail that the rescue workers found. The ultimate sign that her identity had just collapsed.
Yeah. By the time the BOSF teams found her, she's about 7 years old. She's been through this for 6 years. Her trauma was now a conditioned automatic response.
This is what would happen.
Whenever a human approached her, she would immediately, instinctively turn around and present herself, sticking out her rear. The reports even said she would make seductive movements.
My God, she was proactively trying to do the things she'd been forced to do.
To get a reward, or, and this is crucial, to avoid the punishment she expected was coming. That was her only known way to interact with humans.
That learned behavior is just the clearest evidence of how completely she'd been broken.
It is, and her mental state was obvious in other ways, too. The rescuers noted these despairing cries she would make, but maybe the most telling sign of the chronic stress was her incontinence.
You mean?
Uncontrolled urination and defecation. It's a very common physical symptom of severe, prolonged psychological trauma in both humans and animals. Her body was just shutting down from the terror.
And this whole horrific system, this conditioning, it was all just the engine driving the brothel's finances. The madam was actively marketing this.
Oh, yeah. Promising an unprecedented thrill for just a couple of dollars. And this is where the rest of the community starts to become complicit.
Right. Who were the customers?
Initially, it was a handful of regulars, but word spread. Word of this unique service got around.
And the sources mentioned many of them were local farm workers, right?
Yes. Men who would travel sometimes from quite a distance, specifically to go to Kurangpangi for this. The client base grew because it was novel and it was cheap.
And did they ever say why? What was the motivation?
What they later admitted is, well, it's revealing. They said that sex with an orangutan offered a novelty or a freshness they couldn't get elsewhere.
So Pony was just a cheap way for them to unload emotional suppression, I think is the phrase used.
That's it. She was reduced to a disposable toy for human release. And because it only cost $2 or $3, this kind of abuse became widespread in the region. For 6 years, her entire existence was defined by this industrialized depravity.
And that 6-year period, that horror, It finally started to unravel in February of 2003. That's when organizations like the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, BOSF, they finally arrive in Karangpangi to investigate these persistent, terrible rumors.
And it was a difficult mission to even start. The village is remote, the people are suspicious. But the second the rescuers actually laid eyes on Pony, the rumors were confirmed.
And it must have been worse than they even imagined.
Oh, absolutely. They saw her physical state shaved, covered in sores, chained to a wall, lying on a dirty mattress. And then they saw the behavior. That heartbreaking automatic soliciting.
For seasoned rescue workers, that must have just been an emotional gut punch, seeing that learned compliance.
The reports say they were shocked beyond belief, but that shock, it turned into determination almost immediately, and that determination was met with just fierce resistance.
This was not a simple rescue.
Not at all. The villagers did not want to let her go.
And this is where we really get into the community's role in this. Pony wasn't just the madam's income stream. She was.
Yeah.
She was an economic engine for the whole village.
That is the critical piece to understanding the standoff. As Pony became more infamous, men from other villages started traveling there just for her. And the local residents, they got organized. They started charging an extra unofficial entrance fee.
A toll, basically.
A toll, on top of the $2 or $3 for the service. So Pony was the shared financial asset for the whole community. Taking her away meant cutting off a major source of their income.
So when the rescuers tried to get her, the woman who owned Pony, she put on this very theatrical display.
Oh, yeah. She was crying, throwing herself on the ground, screaming that Pony was her baby, her daughter.
Which was just
a grotesque lie. The rescuers called it crocodile tears. She wasn't grieving a pet. She was watching her cash machine being taken away.
But the resistance, it went way beyond just crying and arguing, didn't it?
Yeah.
The whole thing escalated into a real drawn-out conflict.
It did. It went on for nearly a year. The villagers were determined. When BOSF tried to negotiate, they were ambushed, they were threatened. The rescue workers had to go get help from the local police, from government officials, but the villagers just would not back down.
They're described as barbaric in the reports.
Because they were armed. They were threatening the BOSF staff with guns and knives, demanding they give up and leave. And it wasn't just about the money at this point. They had developed this strange, superstitious belief that Pony was a good luck charm for the village.
So it's this toxic mix of greed and superstition.
Which made them incredibly dangerous and unpredictable.
So what we're talking about here is a level of organized criminal resistance that you'd expect for, I don't know, a drug trafficking operation, all to protect access to one abused animal.
Which is why the final rescue had to be a military-style operation. It took almost a full year of conflict and planning. The final operation to get Pony out was incredibly dangerous. It wasn't an animal recovery. It was an armed raid on the village.
And the resources they had to bring in, that speaks volumes about what they were expecting.
The sources confirm it. The final raid required the help of 35 armed police officers, each carrying an AK-47 assault rifle. That's the level of force they needed just to get into the village, secure Pony, and get their team out safely. It shows that everyone recognized this for what it was, an entrenched, organized criminal enterprise.
So Pony is finally free. The 6-year nightmare is over. But that relief must have been immediately followed by the stark reality of her condition.
Oh, absolutely. When they got her out, she was 7 years old, covered in wounds, and just carrying this immense psychological trauma. The staff said her mental state was like a 10 or 12-year-old human child who'd been through unimaginable abuse.
And the first priority had to be the physical care.
Right. They had to treat the chronic abscesses, the infections, the inflamed skin from the constant shaving and insect bites, but they knew. They knew the physical wounds would heal much, much faster than the mental scars.
And those psychological issues, they showed up immediately at the Nairu Menteng Rescue Center.
Immediately. She's now surrounded by other orangutans, her own species, for the first time in years, and she wants nothing to do with them. They were alien to her.
And the learned behavior.
The conditioning was just so deeply ingrained. Whenever she was hungry, whenever she wanted attention from her female carers, or even if she was just confused, she would instinctively turn around and present herself. That was her only learned tool for survival and interaction.
That's just horrifying. Her brain had literally been rewired by this trauma. So how do you even begin to undo 6 years of that?
They put her in what they call the forest school for 2 years. It's basically this intensive rehab program designed to teach rescued orangutans the skills they should have learned from their mothers.
And what does a curriculum like that even look like?
It's incredibly complex. They teach them how to forage, how to identify hundreds of different edible plants and insects, and crucially, which ones are poisonous. They learn how to build nests high up in the trees. They learn about predators, how to move through the canopy, and the social skills needed to live with other orangutans.
But for Pony, there was another major hurdle right at the start.
A huge one. Her deep-seated fear of human men, all of her tormentors, all of her clients, they had all been male. She was terrified of them.
So she had to be isolated.
Initially, yeah, female-only enclosures. Introducing male carers had to be done incredibly slowly over a very long period, which just delayed her entire rehabilitation process.
So after 2 years of this intensive re-education, the staff must have felt some hope. They decided to try her first release.
They did. This was attempt 1. They took her to a place called Bangamat Island. It's a semi-wild environment where they can monitor her without directly interfering. The hope was that instinct, plus the training, would finally kick in.
But her conditioning, it proved stronger than her education.
It failed very quickly. The technicians watching her noticed she spent almost all of her time on the ground, which is extremely dangerous for an orangutan.
And she wasn't looking for food.
She showed zero interest in foraging. She wouldn't climb, she wouldn't search. Instead, she just learned to wait at the feeding platform for the staff to bring her fruit.
She had learned to depend on humans for everything.
Whether it was food for compliance or now food for just existing, it was the same mechanism. They had to bring her back to the center.
But they didn't give up on her.
No, they didn't. They spent years, more years of intensive support and specialized training. It wasn't until June 2013, a full decade after her rescue, that they felt ready to try again.
A decade of care. That's an incredible commitment.
Huh?
So attempt 2, did it seem more successful at first?
It did. And for a little while, there was this amazing sense of relief. The initial reports were glowing. They said she was agile, she was climbing, she was foraging, even socializing with other orangutans. It really looked like all the years of hard work had finally paid off.
But that recovery was it was fragile.
Incredibly fragile. That initial enthusiasm lasted only 3 months. By September of that year, the technicians found her, and she had just catastrophically relapsed.
What does that look like?
She was weak, lethargic, covered in new wounds, and severely malnourished.
And the physical decline was really rapid, wasn't it?
Alarmingly so. Her weight had dropped by 15 to 20 kilograms. That's like 30 to 40 pounds. It meant she just couldn't sustain herself in the wild. She had to be brought back for intensive treatment again, even physiotherapy.
Physiotherapy? For what?
The reports mention torn muscles in her fingers and toes. These are injuries that happen when an orangutan doesn't have the strength or the ingrained knowledge for moving through the canopy. She was literally hurting herself, trying to survive because she didn't know how.
And this led the staff to that final painful conclusion.
Yeah, and it was unavoidable. And it really represents the greatest thing that was stolen from Pony. They had to admit that because of the human abuse, because of the conditioning, she had completely and irrevocably lost the ability to live in the wild.
Her survival instincts were just gone.
Permanently overwritten by her trauma. She couldn't hide, she couldn't forage, she couldn't protect herself.
So she's now dependent on humans.
Ah.
Forever.
That's her status. As of the last reports, Pony, now 21 years old, lives in a socialization complex at the Nyaru Menteng Center. She lives a semi-independent life with other unreleasable orangutans, but she will always need support from human caregivers. Her identity as a person of the forest was stolen, and it can never be given back.
And just when you think the story can't get any more shocking, there's the coda, the complete lack of justice.
Right. Despite the documented suffering, the organized crime, the violent standoff that needed armed police, the woman who owned her and the villagers who profited from her were never punished.
How is that even possible?
The sources say it was due to incomplete local laws in Indonesia, legal loopholes. There just wasn't a law on the books that could adequately prosecute this specific kind of animal cruelty and organized abuse. They walked free.
No consequence.
Zero legal consequences, which just compounds the whole tragedy.
Pony's story, as singular and as harrowing as it is, it forces us to zoom out, doesn't it? It's not an isolated crime.
Not at all. We have to see it as part of this global shadow of zoo sexual abuse or zoophilia. It's so easy to just dismiss Karingpangi as some remote, bizarre anomaly. But the research confirms this kind of depravity is, unfortunately, globally prevalent.
Pony is not the only victim.
She's just one of the most thoroughly documented. The evidence for this is sadly widespread. We found reports citing several recent international examples.
Like what?
Well, there are accounts of a monitor lizard being sexually assaulted by 4 men in Bangladesh, 4 men in India accused of raping a cow, a man in Malaysia sexually assaulting a cat. These aren't historical stories, they are contemporary crimes that echo what Pony went through.
And when we look at how different places have handled this, legally, some have a history of explicit tolerance. The prime example is Denmark.
Denmark is a really crucial case study. For decades, right up until 2015, Denmark was known as a sort of paradise for zoophilia. It wasn't just tolerated, it was actually legal.
And that legality goes back a ways.
It does. Bestiality had been legal there since 1969, and that legal vacuum was immediately exploited. The sources show it led directly to the creation of physical animal brothels.
In a modern Western country.
Exactly. Animals were confined, exploited, and forced into sex work. It's Pony's situation, just in a different setting. These were organized commercial operations running openly for decades, all perfectly legal.
So what changed?
Well, intense pressure from animal welfare groups and international outrage finally forced the government to act. In 2015, they finally banned bestiality to protect animals from this kind of exploitation.
Which is a victory, of course, but...
But the sources caution that banning it just drives it underground. It makes it harder to track, harder to prosecute. It shows that changing the law is a vital first step, but it doesn't just magically solve the underlying sickness.
And this isn't even a modern problem. The history of this kind of contact goes back to antiquity.
It's a shockingly long history. Our sources trace this back to the 4 great ancient civilizations. This is not a new invention.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure. In ancient Egypt, there were certain religious rituals where female priests were required to copulate with a bull, which was believed to be a god's incarnation. So this was ritualized, high-stadium contact.
And we see it in Asia, too.
In Ming and Qing Dynasty China, you find artifacts like the 12 zodiac erotic snuff bottles, which explicitly depict human-animal sexual interactions. In India, you find graphic sculptures on ancient temples showing the same thing. So this behavior has been known and sometimes even ritualized for thousands of years.
And that history is critical, but this whole conversation, it's not just about ethics or history. There's a massive public health risk here.
This is maybe the most serious consequence, and it's the one that people often don't want to talk about. When you talk about bestiality, you are talking about crossing major biological boundaries, and the results can be globally catastrophic.
And the most terrifying example of that is the origin of HIV/AIDS.
It's the ultimate warning. The viruses that became HIV in humans were originally SIV simian immunodeficiency viruses found in chimpanzees. And the sources are very clear. The jump from primate to human happened through sexual contact in certain African tribes and through the bushmeat trade.
So we know for a fact that sexual contact with a non-human primate can unleash a global pandemic.
That is the hard, cold reality. And it's a stark warning for all other cross-species contact. The viruses and pathogens carried by other animals, lizards, cows, even orangutans like Pony are still largely unknown to medical science.
So every act like this is basically a reckless gamble with global health.
It's a massive biological safety risk. Every time that zoonotic barrier is broken, you roll the dice on a new disease emerging. So Pony's case, it's not just about local crime. It's tied to this persistent global phenomenon that carries existential public health threats.
We started this deep dive with Pony, an innocent orangutan stolen from her mother and systematically conditioned over 6 years in an Indonesian village. We've traced her journey from that infant victim to a conditioned captive, and through a violent year-long rescue that required 35 armed police officers.
And we followed the heartbreaking aftermath. A decade of rehabilitation, 2 failed releases, and that final, painful admission that the cruelty she faced had irrevocably stolen her wild identity. She's forever dependent on the very species that broke her.
And all of that is compounded by the fact that her abusers, the madam, the villagers, the clients, were never held accountable because of legal loopholes.
And that's the thing, that specific legal and social indifference that let them walk free. It's the same kind of indifference we see in the historical tolerance in ancient civilizations, and until very recently, in modern Europe. The core issue isn't just the one monstrous act, it's the systems that either allow it or fail to punish it.
So the question we're left with, the one you have to ask yourself is, how do societies address these deep-seated voids, psychological, cultural, legal, political, that allow sentient, intelligent creatures to be turned into disposable things?
Because if organized animal sex crime can be a profitable multi-year business, protected by a whole community, and the perpetrators face zero consequences, then just saving the individual victims like Pony, as vital as that is, it only scratches the surface of a much bigger, much older problem. We have to fundamentally rethink how our laws can protect the most vulnerable from this persistent shadow of human cruelty.